Count the ways. Why it isn't Millie Fitzsimmons? A deep, booming voice said. In the darkness, it was hard to tell exactly where it was coming from, but it felt like it was all around her. Silly Millie, chilly Millie, the ice cold goth girl who always dreaming of death. Am I right? Who are you? Millie demanded. Where are you? Above her, a large pair of terrifyingly blue eyes rolled backward, looking down into the chamber. I'm right here, silly Millie. Or maybe I should say, you're right here. You're right inside my belly. In the belly of the beast, I guess you could say. So, you're the bear? Millie wondered if she had fallen asleep after she climbed inside the old robot. If she was dreaming, this was all too weird. You can just think of me as a friend, your friend till the end. We just have to decide if the end is going to be slow or quick. I I don't understand. The space was starting to feel claustrophobic. She tried the door, it wouldn't budge. You'll understand very soon, Chilly Millie. You goth girls crack me up. All dressed like professional mourners. So serious all the time, daydreaming about death like he's the lead singer of some boy band, and that when you meet him, you'll be loved at first sight. Well, Merry Christmas, Millie. I'm going to make your dreams come true. It's not a question if, but how. What was happening? She was definitely awake. Had she lost her mind, descended into madness like a character in an Edgar Allan Poe story? I like to get out now, she said. Her voice sounded small and shaky. Nonsense, the voice said. You're going to stay in here, all nice and cozy, while we work out how you're going to have your dream date with death. The choice is all yours, but it will be my pleasure to represent you with some options. Options of how to die? Millie felt the cold, metallic taste of fear in the back of her throat. Fantasies about death were one thing, but this felt like reality. Millie, what a stupid name. She was named after her great grandmother, Millicent Fitzsimmons, but Millie wasn't the kind of name you saddled a person with. A cat or a dog, maybe, but not an actual human. Millie's black cat was named Annabel Lee after the beautiful dead girl in the Edgar Allan Poe poem, which Millie's cat officially had a better name than she did, but Millie thought it was made sense that her parents will come up with such a ridiculous name. She loved them, but they were ridiculous people in a lot of ways. Blatantly and impractical, the kind of people who would never think how hard elementary school would be for a little girl. His line rhymed with silly. Her parents fiddled from job to job, from hobby to hobby, and now it seemed from country to country. Over the summer, Millie's dad had been offered a 1 year teaching job in Saudi Arabia. Her mom and dad had given her a choice. She could go with them, it'll be an adventure, her mom kept saying, and be homeschooled, or she could move in with her cookie grandpa for the year and start at the local high school. Talk about a Lulu situation. After lots of crying and raging and sulking, Millie had finally chosen the cookie grandpa option after being stranded in a foreign country with her well known meaning but unreliable parents. And so now Millie was there in her strange little room in Grandpa's big, strange Victorian house. She had to admit the idea of living in an old, sprawling 150-year-old house where surely someone had to have died at some point suited her well enough. The only problem is that it was filled to the brim with her grandparents' junk. Millie's grandpa was a collector. Lots of people have collections, of course. Comic books or gaming cards or action figures, but grandpa didn't collect any specific type of thing so much as accumulate a lot of different things. He was definitely a collector, but a collector of what? Millie wasn't sure. It all seemed very random. Looking around the living room, she could see old license plates and hubcaps, sorry, hanging on one wall, old baseball bats and tennis rackets on another. A life size full of armor stood guard at one front door, and a mangy looking taxidermy bobcat stood at the other side, its mouth open and fangs bared in a menacing fashion. One glass case in the living room contained nothing but old porcelain baby dolls with tiny teeth and staring glass eyes. They were creepy, and Millie tried to stay away from them, though they still showed up sometimes in her nightmares with those little teeth chomping at her. Her new bedroom had been her grandpa's sewing room, and it still contained the old sewing machine, even though her grandma had died before Millie was born. Grandpa had moved in a narrow bed and a dresser to accommodate Millie and her belongings, and she had tried to make the room her own. She draped the bedside lamp with a sheer black lacy scarf so it would give off a muted glow. She covered the dresser with dripping candles, and as she hung posters of Kurt Carson, her favorite singer, on the walls. In one poster, the cover design for his album Rigor Mortis, Kurt's lips were peeled back to reveal a set of metal fangs. A perfect red bead of blood glistened in his chin. The trouble was, though, that no matter how much Millie tried to match the room's decor to her personality, it never quite worked. The sewing machine was there, and the wallpaper was cream colored and decorated with tiny pink rosebuds. Even with Kirk Kerrison's fanging face glowing on the wall, there was something about the room that seemed sweet and old ladyish. "Soup's on," Grandpa called from the bottom of the stairs. This was how he always announced dinner, and yet he had never once served soup. "I'll be there in a minute," Millie yelled back. Not really caring whether she ate dinner or not, she dragged herself off the bed and made her way downstairs slowly, trying to bump into or trip over any of the clutter that seemed to fill every square inch of space in the house. Millie met Grandpa in the dining room where the walls were decorated with souvenir plates printed on the names and landmarks of different states he had visited with Grandma when she was alive. The opposite wall displayed replicas of antique swords. Millie wasn't sure what those were about. Grandpa was very bit as weird as his collections. His wispy gray hair was always messy and wild, and he always wore the same ready tan cardigan. He looked like he would play a wacky inventor in an old movie. "Dinner is served, madam," Grandpa said, setting a bowl of mashed potatoes on the table. Millie sat at her place at the table and surveyed the visually disgusting meal. Mushy looking meatloaf, instant mashed potatoes, and creamed spinach that she had been packaged and frozen in a solid block until he zapped it in the microwave. It was a meal you could eat even if you didn't have teeth, which, Millie supposed, went to the territory of having an old person cook for you. Millie loaded her plate with mashed potatoes since they were the only edible thing on the table. "Now, make sure you get some meatloaf and spinach too," Grandpa said, pressing her bowl of greens. "You need iron. You look so pale." "I like being pale." Millie wore a sheer light powder to make her face look even paler in contrast to the black eyeliner and black clothing she favored. "Well," Grandpa said, helping him to meatloaf, "I'm glad you don't bake yourself in the sun like your mother did when she was your age. Still, you could use a little color on your cheeks." He held the platter of meatloaf to her. "You know I don't eat meat, Grandpa." Meat was gross, and also murder. "Eat some spinach then," Grandpa said, spooning some out on her plate. "Plenty of iron in it. You know, back when I learned to do the little bit of cooking, I can't manage. It was all about meat. Meatloaf, steaks, roast beef, pork chops. But if you'll help me find some vegetarian recipes, I'll sure to cook them. It'll probably be better for my health to eat less meat anyway." Millie sighed and pushed the spinach around in her plate. "Don't bother. It doesn't really matter whether I eat or not." Grandpa said at his fork. "Of course it matters. Everybody's got to eat." He shook his head. "There's no pleasing you there, is there, girlie? I'm trying to be nice and figure out what you like. I want to make you happy here." Millie pushed her plate away. "It's a waste of energy to try to make me happy. I'm not a happy person, and you know what? I'm glad I'm not happy. Happy people are just lying to themselves." "Well, if there's nothing in store for you to buy misery, but I guess you might as well go get started on your homework," Grandpa said, and ate his last bite of mashed potatoes. Millie rolled her eyes and flounced out of the room. Homework was a misery. School was a misery. Her whole life was a misery. In her miserable room, Millie opened her laptop and searched for famous poems about death. She read her favorites, Annabelle Lee, The Cat with the Same Name Was Curled Up on Your Bed, and The Raven by Poe. Then they tried one she never tried before by Emily Dixon. The poem Talk About Death was a guy picking up a girl for a date with death. The thought made Millie lightheaded. She thought of death as a handsome black cloak stranger choosing her as the one she could take away from the boredom and misery of everyday life. She imagined he looked just like Kirk Kirian. Inspired, she grabbed her black leather journal and began to write. She knew poems didn't have to rhyme, but Edgar Allan Poe and Emily Dixon rhymed, so she rhymed her poem too. Not bad, she decided. Sighing with dread of what lay before her, she closed her journal and took out her homework. Algebra. What use was algebra in the face of humans, beings, invincible mortality? None. Well, none except of what she didn't pass in her class. Her parents would call off the allowance that her grandpa doled out to her every week. And as she was saving up for more, morning jewelry, she opened her algebra book, picked up her pencil, and began. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. What? Millie snapped back and slammed her book shut, as if she'd been interrupted doing something she actually enjoyed. Grandpa nudged the door open with his foot. He was carrying a glass of milk and a plate of fragrant chocolate chip cookies. I thought you might need a little study fuel, he said. I chose chocolate anyways, did the trick for me. Grandpa, I'm not a little kid anymore, Millie said. You can't buy my happiness with a few cookies. Okay, Grandpa said, still holding the plate. You want me to take them away then? No, Millie said quickly. Leave them. Grandpa shook his head, smiled a little, and set the plate on the glass on Millie's bedside table. I'm going to putter around in my workshop for an hour or so, girlie, he said. Call me if you need anything. I won't need anything, Millie said, turning back to her algebra homework. She waited until she's sure he was gone and then devoured the cookies. Opinions of how to die exactly, the voice in the darkness said. You're catching on now, bright girl that you are. Now, I call the first couple of options the lazy choices. They don't require me to do anything but keep you here and let nature take its course. The advantage to take these is that they're easy peasy for me to do, but not so easy for you. Slow with lots of suffering, but who knows? That might appeal to your morbid sensibilities. Lots of opportunities for languishing. You like languishing. What do you mean? Millie asked. Whatever the answer was, she knew she wasn't going to like it. Dehydration is one option, the voice said. No matter at all, no water at all, and you could start dying in just 3 days or as many as 7. You're young and healthy, so I put my money on it taking you a while. Depriving the body of water has fascinating effects. With no fluids coming with a filter to flush, the kidneys shut down and your body starts poisoning itself, making you sicker and sicker. Once those poisons have time to build up, you can suffer total organ failure or a heart attack or stroke. But that's death for you. So glamorous, so romantic. Are you making fun of me? The voice that came out of Millie was tiny and soft, the voice of a scared little girl. Not at all, my dear. I like you, Millie, and that's why I'm here to make your wishes come true, like a genie, except you're the one who's trapped in a bottle. The voice stopped to chuckle. Starvation is another classic, too, but that's really a slow moving train. It takes weeks for the body to use up its stores of nutrition to break down all its proteins and turn in itself. It can take weeks. Some people have been lasting a couple of months. Millie knew her grandpa would rescue her before she could starve to death. That'll never work. Grandpa comes in here to putter around after dinner every night. He'll find me. How? The voice asked. He'll hear me in here. I'll scream. Scream all you want, Lamb Chop. It's soundproof. No one will hear you. And anyway, after a few days, you'll be too weak to scream. Winter break was just 1 week away, and the whole school was decorated with wreaths, Christmas trees and the occasional menorah. Millie didn't know why people got so excited over the holidays. They were just a desperate attempt to invent some happiness in the face of life's utter meaninglessness. Well, they couldn't fool her. People could wish her Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays until they turned Santa Claus red in the face, but she wouldn't say it back. Not that people were going out of their way to wish Millie well. As she walked down the hall in the lunchroom, one blonde cheerleader, Millie didn't even know her name, said, I'm surprised to see you didn't even I'm surprised to see you out in the daylight, Dracula's daughter. The cheerleader looked over at her equally blonde friend, whom she'd been talking to more than she actually been talking to Millie, and they all laughed. The Dracula's daughter thing had started since she'd been carrying around a paper back copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and one of the Jockey Popular guys had said, Oh, look, how sweet. She's reading a book about her dad. From then on, she's been a Dracula's daughter. Of course, everybody knew she was really Jeff and Audrey Fitzsimmons' daughter, which made her almost as much of a misfit as she would have been if Dracula were her real dad. The Fitzsimmons were kind of a joke in the town, famous for their tendency to start projects with great enthusiasm and then abandon them. They had bought a rundown but once beautiful colonial house when Millie was 10 and had thrown themselves into refurbishing it. They had kept it up for about 3 months until they ran out of time, money, and energy. As a result, the house has weird patchwork quality. The living room and the kitchen were repainted and had a few fixtures, but the bedrooms still had old peeling wallpaper and floors with squeaky boards. The bathroom pipes screamed, and you turn on the water, and the ancient tub, sink, and toilet never looked clean no matter how much they were scrubbed. The most talked about thing, though, was the exterior of the house. Millie's dad had repainted the front and one side a nice soft blue with a cream tint. But paint was expensive, painting was exhausting, and he really didn't like getting up on ladders. As a result, the front of the house was painted beautifully, but the back and other side were still covered with old flaking white paint. Millie's mom said nobody would notice. It was like when people arranged the Christmas tree so the ugly side faced the wall. People noticed. People also noticed the Fitzsimmons' inability to keep a steady job. Millie's parents were always coming up with some new scheme that finally was going to bring them the success of their dreams. One year, her mom was making candles and selling them at the farmer's market, while her dad started a nutritional supplement store that closed its doors after 6 months. After that, her mom and dad started a store that sold yarn and knitting supplies, and they might have a go of it. Either of her parents had known more about yarning and knitting, and they bought a food truck even though they were both terrible cooks. Millie couldn't understand how her parents could remain so optimistic with failure after failure, but they did. They attacked with each new project with huge enthusiasm, and then after a few months, both the project and the enthusiasm fizzled out. They weren't poor exactly, there was always food to eat, even if toward the end of the month. It tended to dwindle to pancake mix and boxed macaroni and cheese, but there was always worry about how the bills would get paid. Millie knew that her grandpa had helped them out in some months. Her grandpa was always considered weird in town, but was cut some slack because he was old and a widower and had been an excellent high school math teacher for many years. As a result, he earned the title of eccentric instead of weird. Some people said that maybe by taking this teaching job in Saudi Arabia, Jeff was actually getting it together and following in his dad's footsteps. Millie knew, though, that her dad would further away this opportunity like he had so many years. So Dracula's daughter or Jeff and Audrey Fitzsimmons' daughter, either one was one-way ticket to being a social outcast. In the cafeteria, Millie took a second to adjust to the deafening din of hundreds of teenagers walking and laughing. She walked past a table full of popular girls and saw her best friend from elementary school, Hannah. sitting with them, laughing at something all the other girls were laughing about. Millie and Hannah had been inseparable from kindergarten through fifth grade, playing on the swings or jumping rope together at every recess, and playing dolls or board games at each other's houses after school. But in middle school, popularity started to be more and more important to Hannah, and she drifted away from Millie and start and toward the crowd who was always giggling about clothes and boys. What Millie understood about Hannah did not was that those girls never accepted Hannah as more than a hanger-on. Hannah lived in a plain little house as a plain little neighborhood and didn't have the money or social status to make the cut. The popular girls didn't push her away, but they never let her enter their inner circle either. It made Millie sad that Hannah preferred to accept crumbs from the popular girls rather than real friendships from her. But then a lot of things made Millie sad. Millie sat alone, nibbling on the egg salad sandwich and apple slices her grandpa had packed for her, and reading Tales of Mystery and Imagination. She was managing to drown down all the cafeteria noise and focus on the story she was reading, The Fall of the House of Usher, Roderick Usher. The main character in the story couldn't bear noise of any kind, but then she felt herself being watched. She looked up from her book to see a lanky boy with horn-rimmed glasses and frizzy hair that had been dyed a far orange red. Both his ears were studded with silver earrings. Millie coveted his black leather jacket. Hi, I was wondering, he nodded at the chair across from Millie. Is anybody sitting here? Was this guy asking to sit with her? Nobody ever asked to sit with her. My imaginary friend, Millie said. Wait, was that a joke? She never joked with people. The boy grinned, a revealing mouthful of braces. Well, will your imaginary friend her lap? Millie looked at the empty chair for a second. She said, "See yourself." Okay, he said, laying his tray down. Thanks to both of you, I don't really know anybody yet. I'm new. Nice to meet you. New. I'm Millie. What was what? Was she a comedian now? My name's Dylan, actually. I just moved here from Telio. He gestured toward her book. His fingernails were short but polished black. A Poe fan, huh? Millie nodded. Me too, Dylan said. And H.P. Lovecraft? I love all the old scary writers. I never read Lovecraft, Millie said. Better to be honest than to try to fake knowledge and talk herself into a corner. I've heard of him, though. Oh, you love him, Dylan said, ducking a cafeteria, issued a chicken nugget into a puddle of ketchup. Super dark and twisty. He looked around the cafeteria, his face a mask of disdain. So this is school as long as it seems? Lamer, Millie said, marking her place in her book and shutting it. The House of Usher wasn't going anywhere, and she couldn't remember when she last had interest in conversation. Well, I'll tell you what, Dylan said, gesturing with a french fry. So far, you're the only person I've seen here who seems cool. Millie felt her face heating up. She hoped a blush wouldn't pinker her pallor. Thanks, she said. I like your jacket. And I like your earrings. She reached up to touch one of the black tear tops that dangled from her earlobes. Thanks. They're jet. Victorian morning jewelry. I know, Dylan said. He knew? What kind of high school guy will know about Victorian morning jewelry? I have a few pieces of it, Millie said. I mostly find them on eBay. I can't afford any different kind, though, which is Millie. Dylan picked up his hand. Wait, don't tell me. It's the kind where they weave the hair of the dead person into the jewelry, right? Yes, Millie said, shocked and amazed. Those pieces show up sometimes on eBay, but they always cost a fortune. The bell rang, signaling that lunch period was about to end. Dylan leaned toward Millie and half whispered, Do not ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Millie finished. Where had this guy come from? Toledo, sure, but how is he so sophisticated and knowledgeable? She had never met anyone like him. Dylan stood up. Millie, it's been a rare pleasure. Would you and your imaginary friend mind very much if I join you to a lunch tomorrow? Millie felt the corners of her mouth twitch in an unfamiliar way. We don't mind at all, she said. See, I have thought about freezing you to death too. Ow, sorry. See, I have thought about freezing you to death too, the voice said. I thought I could short out the power in here, so the space heater turns off, and my metal body could get pretty cold. But I figured your grandpa would come in and notice the power was out in his precious workshop, and would fix it right away. So freezing to death is a no-go. Sorry, if you had your heart set on that one, sweet pea. Millie was shivering not from the cold, but from fear. I don't understand. Why do you want to kill me? Interesting, you should ask. The voice said, there are a couple reasons, actually. The first is quite simple that it's something to do. I sat in a salvage yard for ages before your grandpa found me and brought me here, where I have been sitting too. I'm bored out of my skull. Not that I literally have a skull, but you know what I mean. Aren't there other things you could do besides killing people? Millie asked. Whoever this being was, it was obviously intelligent. Maybe she could reason with it. Not so interesting. And plus, there's my second reason, which is that death is what you want. You've been mooning around since you moved here, talking about how you want to die. Well, I like to kill people, and you want to die. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, like those little birds that pick the parasites off rhinoceroses. The bird gets to eat, and the rhinoceros gets rid of the itchy little bugs. We both get what we want. Win win. Millie suddenly realizes that she had spoken of death, written about it, but had always been an interesting idea to play around with. She never intended to take any action to make it a reality. But I don't want to die. Not really. A horrible rumbling sound surrounded Millie and shook the body of the machine that trapped her. It took her for a few seconds to recognize the sound as laughter. For dinner, Grandpa made spaghetti with marinara sauce, garlic bread, and Caesar salad. It was much better than the meals he usually slung together. You're actually eating tonight, Grandpa said, because this is actually good, Millie said, twirling spaghetti around on her fork. All right, I finally found something you like to eat, Grandpa said. I'll add it into my limited repertoire. It'll keep the sauce meatless for you and add meatballs to mine. So everybody's happy, herbivores and carnivores alike. Well, happy may be stretching it, Millie said, unwilling to admit that she actually had a kind of a good day. But the spaghetti is good, and my day at school didn't totally stink. And what made the day less stinky than usual? Grandpa asked, spurring a meatball. I met someone who seemed kind of cool. Really? A girl or a boy someone? Millie didn't like Grandpa's instituting tone. Well, not that it matters, but it happens to be a boy. Don't try to turn it into some kind of love story, though. We just had a decent conversation at all. A decent conversation is something, especially those days. Most people your age don't look up from their phones long enough to say as much as "How do you do?" Grandpa said. Not to put the cart before the horse, but I met your grandma when I was a little older than you. Are you now? So what? Now you get me to engage this guy I just met? Grandpa, I'm 14. Grandpa laughed. You're right that you're much too young to be engaged, and your grandpa and I didn't engage when we were teenagers either, but we were high school sweethearts, and when we went to the same college, we got engaged our senior year of college and married in June right after we graduated. He smiled. And it all started with a good conversation at lunch, like you had today. So you never know. Slow down, old man, Millie said, fighting off a smile. Grandpa's eyes went soft and misty. I'm just reminiscing. I wish you could have seen your grandma Millie. She was really something special, and to lose her when she wasn't even 40, it's like Annabelle Lee, Millie said. The Poe poem? Grandpa asked. It was many and many a year ago, and it came down by the sea. Yes, I guess it was something like that. You know Poe? Millie asked. It was weird to hear him recite one of her favorite poems. Grandpa was a math person. She didn't expect her to know about poetry. Believe it or not, I am a pretty elaborate old dude. I like Poe and a lot of other writers too. I know you like Poe because he's dark and spooky, and it's easy to romanticize death when you're young, and it's so far away, but Poe didn't write about death because he thought it was romantic. He wrote about it because he lost so many of the people he loved. You've never ever experienced what kind of loss, Millie. It changes you. He blinked hard. You know, for years after she died, friends were always trying to fix me up with another woman, but it would never work. She was the only one for me. Millie had never really thought about Grandpa's feelings before. How he must have felt when Grandma had got sick and died. How lonely he must have been after she was gone. How he might still be lonely now. That must have been hard, she said, losing Grandma. Grandpa nodded. It was. I still miss her every day. Well, thanks for dinner, Millie said. I guess I better get started on my homework. Without being asked, Grandpa said, smiling, this is certainly a special day. In her room, Millie didn't think of death. She had thought of Dylan, and she had thought about what Grandpa had said about Grandma. When she recited Annabelle Lee in her head this time, it seemed like a poem about love instead of a poem about death. Silly Millie, for someone who doesn't want to die, you sure spent a lot of time talking about it. The voice surrounding her said, but that's the way of things, isn't it? Talk is always easier than action, I think, Millie said, sniffling. That when I said I wanted to die, what I really want to is escape. I didn't want death, I just wanted my life to be different. Oh, but that really takes action, doesn't it? The voice said, changing life for the better, especially when the world is in such a rotten place. It's much easier and ultimately much more satisfying just to snuff it out. Which brings me to my second set of options, much more interesting ones. These are quick and easy for you for the most part, but they require a little more effort from me. I am not complaining though. There's something I like more than a good challenge to relieve my boredom. Say, you like Dracula, don't you? Millie could barely find her voice to answer. Why? Are you going to bite my neck? Now, how could I do that with to you and my Billy, silly girl? I know you're a Dracula fan. The kids at school call you Dracula's daughter, don't they? Well, what you might not know is that the character of Dracula was inspired by a real person, a prince named Vlad Dracula, but he's better known as his nickname, Vlad the Impaler. Millie's insides seemed to turn to jelly. Vlad killed thousands of his enemies, but his crowning achievement was creating a force of the impaled, where thousands of his victims, men, women, and children, were skewered through states, driven into the ground. Now I'm no prince, and I can't aspire to that level of achievement, but one little old impaling can't be that hard, can it? I could just take one of my metal rods and drive it through my body cavity, and it'll go straight through you and out the other side. If the spike goes through your vital organs, death comes quickly. If it doesn't, there can be some hours of bleeding and suffering. The people who walked through the forest of the impaled talked about the moaning and gasping of the victims. So, impaling. One might say other deaths in pale in comparison. The voice tone was cheery. It can work quickly or slowly, but the result is the same in the end. Like I said, win-win. No, Millie whispered. She wanted her mom and dad. She wanted her grandpa. They would help her if they only knew. She'd even sell for goofy Uncle Rob and Aunt Sherry as long as they would come to her rescue. She would even put on a Christmas sweater if it made them happy. Millie sat at her table in the cafeteria expectantly. She had taken special care with her appearance in this morning, choosing a lacy black top and a jet Victorian mourning necklace from her small collection. Her face powder enhanced her color, and her black eyeliner had the perfect cat-like effect. As minutes passed, she started to worry. What if Dylan didn't show up? What if she had gone all dressed up for nothing? What if, as she always suspected, life offered no possibility of pleasure or happiness? But then there he was with his leather jacket and a fire engine red hair and shiny silver earrings. Hey, Millie said, trying not to sound like she was too happy to see him. Hey, he said, standing his tray on the table and sending a request from her. I brought you something. Millie's heart pounded in excitement. She hoped she didn't show it. He reached into the pocket of his leather jacket and pulled out a warm paper book, H.P. Lovecraft. He said, I was telling you about him yesterday. I remember. Millie said, taking the book. The Call of Cthulhu and Other Stories. Did I say that right? Cthulhu? Who knows? Dylan said. H.P. Lovecraft made it up. And he's dead, so we can't ask him. You can keep the book. I got a copy and a hardcover for my birthday, he grinned. My parents are cool. They don't mind if I like weird stuff. Thanks. She felt a little smell creeping up on her. She slipped the book into her bag. She would certainly read the book, but it wasn't the book itself that was making her feel all smiley. It was that Dylan had thought of her. While he was at home, not in her presence, he had thought of her, found the book, put it in his jacket pocket, and remembered to give it to her. In her experience, boys weren't usually this thoughtful. After dinner in her room, Melanie started reading the H.P. Lovecraft book. Dylan was right. It was weird. Weirder than Poe's stuff, even and scary in a way that made it feel like spiders were crawling beneath her skin, but she loved it. It was the perfect gift for Dylan to give her. Millie wasn't a flowers and candy kind of girl. After she read a couple of stories, she opened her laptop. Instead of Googling poems about death, she searched for poems about love. She found the famous one by Elizabeth Barrett Browning that began, How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. She had read the poem before and thought of it just pretty words, but now she could appreciate the feelings behind the words, strong feelings for the rare poem who truly understand you and whom you understand in return. She took out her black leather journal, chewed out her pen, and thought. Finally, she wrote. She wrote the poem back to herself and sighed with satisfaction. Her mood only darkened slightly when she set her journal aside to start on her homework. No? Pity! I always think impaling was a certain dramatic flair. Perhaps something with a little more zing? Electrocution is always an effective option. Did you know the idea of the electric chair was developed in the 1800s by a dentist named Alfred P. Southwick? He came up with the idea of an electric chair based on his dental chair. That's not exactly comforting to people with dental phobias, now is it? I don't have a chair to strap you into, but I do have the power to shoot a series of strong electrical currents through my body cavity. If the currents zap your heart or brain, you'll die quickly. If it doesn't, you'll have some nasty burns, and your heart will go into flabberation, which will generally kill you if you don't have the help. And I think we've already established that you don't have anyone here to help you. Help was a word Millie wanted desperately to scream, but she knew it was a waste of energy. Energy she needed to conserve if she had any hope of survival. So, what do you think, Cupcake? Electrocution? You'll be shocked at how effective it is. And electrifying, good time. Another chuckle. Millie had once experienced a shock unplugging a hairdryer from a wall socket in the badly wired hotel room. She had felt the electricity tear painfully up her arm and for a few moments was out of breath as if someone had punched her in the stomach. She didn't want to think about how an electric current strong enough to kill her would feel. A good time for you, but not for me, she said. On Saturday afternoon, when most other kids were at the mall or the movies or hanging out at one other's house, Millie walked downtown to the public library. It was about a 20-minute walk, so the walk there was back to an hour or two of browsing and reading sandwiched. In between was a pleasant way to spend a Saturday afternoon to solitude. Today, she roamed the library stacks looking for suitably dark reading material. She had finished The Call of Cthulhu and was disappointed that there weren't any more books by Lovecraft on the shelves. Hey! A voice called behind her. She gasped and jumped, but then it was Dylan. I didn't mean to startle you, he said. Hey, did you read the Lovecraft book? Millie couldn't believe that the stars had long such that she had ran into Dylan outside of school. Yes, I loved it. It was kind of hoping that they had more stuff by him here. Dylan said. I bet I can pick something up that you will like. Give me a sec. With a thoughtful expression, he scanned the shelves, then pulled out a thin book with a black cover and handed it to her. The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson, she read. Yep, you'll love her. It's a perfect book to continue your classic horror pursuits. Hey, he said, I was reading at that table over there until I saw you. If you want to sit there and read too, you can. Okay. Millie worked hard not to show how happy the invitation made her. I've got to admit, I have an ulterior motive inviting you, Dylan said. I wanted to see the look on your face once you finished reading the first short story in that book. They sat at the table across from each other and right in a compassionable silence. Millie loved talking to Dylan, but being quiet with him was nice too. She read The Lottery with a growing feeling of suspense, and when she got to the ending, Dylan laughed. You're reading with your mouth hanging open, he said. That's the ultimate surprise ending, isn't it? It really is. Say, Dylan said, I was thinking that after I checked out my books, I might have a cup of tea at the cafe next door. Would you like to do that too? I mean, you don't have to drink tea just because I do. You can have coffee or hot chocolate. Tea sounds nice, Millie said. This afternoon was turning out to be nice, surprisingly so. Millie had passed you and me coffee and tea hundreds of times, but had never gone inside. It was a pleasant place with exposed brick walls displaying paintings by local artists. Sitting with Dylan with their steaming cups, Millie said, I think I might like it to be a librarian someday. She had never told anyone this before. She had always been afraid of getting laughed at. That'll be cool, Dylan said. You love books. I love books and I love quiet, Millie said, sipping her Earl Grey tea. You should totally dress in a golf librarian style too, Dylan said. You should put your hair up and wear your jewelry and black Victorian dress and those old-fashioned glasses that just clip onto your nose. What are they called? Pince-nez? Dylan grinned. Yeah, those. And when you dress like that and shows people in the library, you'll scare the living daylights out of them. Millie laughed and she had to admit it felt good. School days were better when she knew she'd have lunch with Dylan. She could spend the morning looking forward to seeing him and the afternoon thinking about what they'd said to each other. Sometimes she felt a little silly for spending so much time thinking about a boy. But Dylan wasn't just any other ordinary boy. Today, when she got home from school, her grandpa met her in the cluttered living room. I thought we might go to school holiday bazaar night, he said. Instead of his usual cardigan, he was wearing an ugly green pullover sweater decorated with creepy smiling Christmas trees. The holiday bazaar is stupid, Millie rolled her eyes. Just a bunch of people selling ugly Christmas party tree ornaments made of popsicle sticks. Oh, I always thought the bazaar was kind of fun when I was a teacher. This year, there's a chili supper, and you can choose between meat and vegetarian chili, and there's an all-you-can-eat buffet. Think about those words for a minute, Millie. He paused dramatically. All you can eat, cookie, buffet. You really done your homework this time, haven't you? Millie said. She would never say it out loud, but it was kind of cute how excited Grandpa was. I have. I take cookies very seriously. I can see that, Millie sighed. Maybe just this time she could let the old man have something he wanted. The two of them didn't get out much, and it just might be good for him to be among other people. Okay, I'll go. I guess, even if it's not my thing. Great, Grandpa said. We'll leave in about an hour. He looked her up and down. Maybe you could wear something besides black, something a little more festive. Don't push it, Grandpa, Millie said. She couldn't believe she agreed to attend in such a lame event. But maybe Dylan would be there, under duress, like her, like they will make fun of it together. The school halls were sparkly with Christmas lights, and Millie had been correct in predicting the ugliness of the ornaments for sale. But the vegetarian chili was tasty, and there was an impressive variety of cookies on the cookie buffet, including gingerbread, which was her favorite. After she and Grandpa ate her fill, she wandered the hallways, giving the impression of looking at the craft displays, but really looking for Dylan. She had found him on the second floor hallway, but not in the way she wanted to. Dylan was sitting in the front of booth, selling reindeer Christmas ornaments made out of candy canes. But he wasn't alone. He was with Brooke Harrison, a blatantly pretty blonde girl who was in Millie's U.S. government class. Dylan and Brooke were holding hands and laughing about some private jokes in a very couple-ish way. Millie bit her lip to keep from gasping, turned around, and ran through the hall and down the stairs. She had to find Grandpa. She had to get out of there. Where's the fire, Dracula's daughter? Some random kid asked her. She didn't even bother to process who it was. They were all the same anyway. She ran into the cafeteria, scanned the crowd for Grandpa's ugly Christmas sweater. Unfortunately, a lot of people were wearing ugly Christmas sweaters. She finally found Grandpa next to the drinks table, sipping coffee and chatting with a couple of older men who were also retired teachers. These guys apparently shopped at the same ugly Christmas sweater store as Grandpa. We have to go. Millie hissed at him. Grandpa knitted his brow in concern. Are you sick or something? No, I just have to go. Why wouldn't move he why wouldn't excuse me he moved faster? Okay, honey. He gave the other old guys a look at to seem to they're so emotional at this age, and then said, see you later, fellas. Merry Christmas. In the car, Grandpa said, what's the matter, honey? Did somebody at the school say something that hurt your feelings? Millie couldn't believe her grandpa could be so stupid. Nobody at school said anything to me because nobody at school ever says anything to me. Nobody at the school cares whether I live or die. She stifled a sob and wiped under her eyes to try to stop the flow of tears. I can remember feeling that way when I was your age. I wouldn't go back to being 14 for anything, but even with all the years, I'd get back. The tears weren't stopping. Millie looked out of the shadow window and tried to ignore Grandpa. He couldn't possibly understand. Nobody would understand, especially people who got excited about Christmas sweaters and cookies and all that fake happy stuff they filled their minds with to sward off their fear of death. Millie wasn't afraid of death right now. Death felt like her only friend. My, we certainly are picky, aren't we? The voice said. For somebody who wants the end result, we're awfully fussy about how to achieve it. But there are lots more options. I feel like a waiter talking about my way through the menu at a fancy restaurant. The difference, of course, is that one menu gets you fed, the other menu gets you dead. Low rumbling laughter. Oh, I cracked myself up. Since I was talking about food, how about boiling? Do you know that Harry the Eighth made boiling alive the official form of punishment during his reign? Funny that they all call boiling alive because goodness knows you don't stay alive for very long. But I could easily flood my insides with water, then use my energy stores to bring the temperature up. First, it'll feel like nice warm bath, but then it will just keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter. I wonder if it'll turn like a red lobster. Millie sat miserably at her table in the cafeteria, knowing she was doomed to eat alone. She opened an anthology of horror stories she had checked out from the school library. Books, at least, would always keep her company. But then Dylan sat down across from her, acting like absolutely nothing was wrong. Hey, he said, how can you sit across from me like that? Millie said. He was so casual, opening up his ketchup packets and creating a little red pull on his plate. Just like always. Like what? Dylan said, looking last. I see her every day. I would think you want to sit with Brooke. Millie said. Brooke has a different lunch period than me. He obliviously dipped a nugget into his ketchup puddle and popped it into his mouth. Millie felt anger rising up all the way from her toes. So, I'm what? Your backup? Her understudy? Dylan rubbed his eye. Dylan rubbed his face like he was tired. I'm sorry, Millie. I'm trying to keep up. I really am, but you're not really making any sense. Millie couldn't understand how he could be so stupid. Dylan, I saw you with her at the bazaar last night. Yeah? So? She had never felt so exasperated. You were holding hands. You were clearly together. Yeah? So? He repeated, but then a look of realization dawned on his face. Wait, Millie, do you think you and I were dating? Millie swallowed hard and told herself not to cry. You noticed me, brought me a book, took me out for tea. Of course, I thought we might, in the future, date, I mean. Wow, Dylan said. I'm sorry if I misled you. I mean, you're really great and really pretty and everything, but I never meant to think that we were anything other than friends. Haven't you ever had a friend who's a boy, but who's not, a boyfriend? Hannah had been Millie's only friend, but that had abandoned her. There was no way Millie was sharing this fact with Dylan. Of course I have. But Dylan, you told me I was the only cool person you met at the school. I did, but that was my first day. I've met other cool people since. Like Brooke? Millie's voice dropped in sarcasm. What? You don't approve of Brooke? Dylan said. She's blonde and basic, Millie said. No need to mimic words. The truth was the truth. Have you ever had a conversation with her? Dylan asked. Do you even know what she's like? Had Millie ever heard Brooke say anything? She was quite in U.S. government class, Millie assumed, because she had nothing interested or important to say. I'd never talked to her, Millie said. I just don't talk to anyone. Dylan shook his head. Well, Brooke isn't just anyone. She's smart and well read and nice. She wants to be a veterinarian. Why does it matter what color her hair is? Dylan looked at her so hard like he was looking in through her. Millie, I am disappointing you. You of all people with your black wardrobe and black eyeliner and black nail polish, it seems like you'd better be than to judge a person based on her appearance. You don't like when people do it to you, and yet you're guilty of the very same crime. I'm pretty sure that's called hypocrisy. He stood up. I think this conversation is over. As the winter holidays approached, Millie's mood became grimmer and grimmer. The cold temperatures and the gray skies and the stripped bare trees all matched her emotional state perfectly. Cheerful holiday lights and the plastic Santas on people's houses filled her with anger, and the sound of Christmas carols in stores and other public places enraged her. She felt that she couldn't be held responsible for her actions if she had to hear Winter Wonderland one more time. Holiday cheer, peace on earth, and goodwill were just lies people told themselves. Winter was the season of death. At dinner, vegetable stir fry for Millie, chicken, and vegetable stir fry for Grandpa. Grandpa said, So, are you excited that tomorrow's the last day before winter break? Not really, Millie said. Listen, I've been meaning to tell you I'm not celebrating Christmas this year. Grandpa's face fell. Not celebrating Christmas, but whatever not. Millie poked at a piece of broccoli with her fork. I refuse to pretend to be happy on some particular day just because society tells me I am supposed to be. It's not about society, it's about family. Grandpa said, It's about getting together and enjoying each other's company. On Christmas Eve, your aunt and uncle and cousins are coming over, and your mom and dad are going to Skype in so they can be a part of things. We have a big dinner and exchange gifts, and then we'll have hot chocolate and cookies and play board games. Millie felt nauseous at the thought of all that false cheer. I'll be here because I don't have any place else to go, but I refuse to be participating in festivities. Is that a fact? Grandpa said. He pushed his plate away. Listen, Millie, you've never been a particularly cheerful child. Heaven knows you are the most fussiest baby I've ever seen. And when you were a toddler, your temper tantrums were legendary. But I feel like you're especially unhappy here with me now. And I'm generally sorry for that. I'm an old man and I'm no expert on what young girls like, but I've tried to make things as nice for you as I can. Maybe it would have been better if you had chosen to move around with your mom and dad. I know what it must have been hard to be far away from them. I don't miss my parents, Millie shouted. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure it was true. Sure, they made her crazy sometimes when they were together, but it was weird having them so far away. And Skyping with them on Sunday nights wasn't clearly enough to make up for their absence from her everyday life. It didn't help that she tended to be in a bad mood during their Skype sessions, mad at them for being gone, and so the conversations weren't always pleasant. Okay, maybe you don't, Grandpa said, but something's been in you lately. Maybe a problem at school or falling out with a friend. I'm not saying I can help, but sometimes it helps just to have someone to listen. Against her will, a picture of Dylan popped into her head. Dylan, the first day she met him, she couldn't believe this cool new guy who could have sat anywhere he wanted in the cafeteria chose to sit right across from her. Well, that never happened anymore. Now he sat at a table with those guys who never talked about anything but fantasy role playing games, and Millie sat alone with only a book for company. I told you I don't have any friends, Millie said. Well, maybe you could try to make one, Grandpa said. You don't have to be a social butterfly if you don't want to, but everybody needs to have one good friend. You don't know what I need. Millie stood up from the table. I'm going to do my homework. She didn't really have homework since tomorrow was the last day before break, but she'd always, whatever she had to say, get out of there. And I'm going to my workshop, Grandpa said. You're not the only one who can storm out of a room, you know, girlie. It was the first time since she had moved in with her grandpa that he sounded like he was actually mad at her. In her room, Millie opened her laptop, went to YouTube, and typed in a Kurt Carson music. She clicked on a Death Mask, her favorite song. The video was filled with images of ravens and bats and circling vultures. In the center of it all was Kurt Carson himself, growling his way through the morbid lyrics. His black hair spiky, his complexion pallid, his black eyeliner perfectly applied. Millie felt like Kurt Carson might be the one person in the planet who could understand her. Who is she kidding? Nobody would.